Welcome to Charlevoix the Beautiful, the city on 3 lakes. The DVD you are about to see tells how the city began and how it grew over 16 decades to become known throughout the world as one of the most important commercial and resort areas of Michigan and the Midwest. For centuries, the small body of water at its center, now called Round Lake, was hidden from view. It's not known if Jesuit priest, scholar, and French government spy Pierre-François Xavier de Charlevoix, after whom the county, and later the town which became the county seat are named, ever saw it. It is known that he was stranded by a storm on Fisherman's Island a few miles south at the end of July 1721, as described in his letters printed in 1763. Native Americans have inhabited its shores since around 1500 BCE. Many were converted to Christianity in the early 1800s and built Green Sky Church a few miles northeast of town in the 1850s. It was formed entirely of hand-hewn logs over a 10-year period, placed with precision using no metal parts to serve the area's Native American congregation, long affiliated with the Methodist Church. A few renovations were made, a bell tower was added, and the little treasure in the woods still stands today as a beacon of the faith. Nearby stand the remnants of the circle of 30 original tribal council trees, bent at planting by each tribe who pledged peace with one another as long as the trees bore leaves. In the meantime, on Beaver Island in northern Lake Michigan, not far away, the kingdom of maverick Mormon James Strang was gaining followers, influence, and power, hoping to establish its mainland base on Holy Island in the south arm of Pine Lake, later to be known as Lake Charlevoix. A battle with mainland fishermen in July of 1853 resulted in the abandonment of the settlement, then known as Pine River, for a year. There were no fatalities, but several were wounded. A marker was placed at the battle site, today's Lake Michigan Municipal Beach, in 1940. What was it that brought people here to begin with? Fish. Lake Michigan teemed with millions of tons of what was called finny gold. Charlevoix's first permanent settlers were Medad and Phoebe Thompson and their many children. They were Mormons disillusioned with the dictatorial, often violent life on Beaver Island. The family moved to the shore of Pine Lake near the deserted settlement in 1854. Phoebe was a direct descendant of John Alden and Priscilla Mullins of the Plymouth colony. The Thompsons were followed in 1855 by John and Phoebe Dixon and their 3 children. But the Dixons were so harassed by the island Mormons, they left within a few months for fear of their lives. That same year, Odawa Chief Louis McSawba arrived from Lower Michigan. He put down roots north of Round Lake at the base of a large, wooded sand dune that would later bear the honor of his name as Mount McSawba. His grandson Dan was a Charlevoix mailman for 30 years, believed to be the only Indian chief ever to carry the mail for Uncle Sam. After Strang's assassination in 1856, the Dixons, accompanied by then 18-year-old Archibald Butters, returned to stay. They built their own log cabin overlooking Pine Lake, and Butters worked for John Dixon in this cabin on the shore of Round Lake, but only for a year before he left to seek his fortune in the Grand Traverse region to the south. The population of Pine River over the winter of 1856 to 1857, the Thompsons, the Dixons, and young Butters, less than 20. In late 1857, into the cabin moved Seth and Liza Mason, seen here with 2 of their 9 children, and Liza's brother, Morris J. Stockman, and his wife Lottie, before each family found its own dwellings. For several years now, settlers had begun to trickle in, many to continue on down Pine Lake, where they founded other communities, or cleared land and built homesteads in an astonishingly beautiful but unforgiving land in which only the hardiest could survive. Pine River and Charlevoix County were beginning to grow. The climax to the decade was the construction of the settlement's first bridge, across the neck of Pine River near Round Lake in 1859. It was a foot traffic only affair, just 4 feet wide and 2 feet high. Road traffic, such as the ox-drawn wagon it left, passed through the shallow waters beside the bridge. This first community structure was the harbinger of great things to come. This is how Charlevoix appeared in 1890 from the west side and schoolhouse to State Street and the town hall, over downtown, and across Round Lake to the Chicago Club. This photo, overlooking the Baptist Church, was taken from the roof of the new schoolhouse the same year. It illustrates an earlier description that claimed, "The visitor is at once impressed with the neat and tasty appearance of the streets and buildings, and becomes attached to the place by reason of the cordial greeting he receives from the people whom he meets." In 1891, a lookout tower was placed atop Mount McSauba that provided a splendid view for 25 cents. It blew down on Thanksgiving Day, 1905, and was never rebuilt. Seen here in front of the Opera House in 1891 is a bandwagon David Nettleton built for the Charlevoix Cigar Company Band. This was also the year that a construction dock was finally put up in Pine Lake for a long-awaited railroad, and a locomotive was brought in by barge to be used to move track materials between Charlevoix and Petoskey. By 1892, a small army of workers had arrived to complete the job, building the railroad bridge abutment on the north side of the upper channel and the stone foundation for the bridge in the middle of the channel on which would ride this turntable. The bridge was completed in June, the last of the tracks were laid, and on June 26, 1892, the Chicago and West Michigan Railway steamed in from the south to cross the bridge and pull up to an almost finished depot. Charlevoix was now connected to the rest of the world 12 months a year and no longer had to rely exclusively on maritime commerce. The Belvedere Resort had been promised its own depot, but had to make do at first with this platform by the tracks. The building was put up later that summer in 1892. Resort husbands could board in Chicago or Detroit on Friday evening, arrive the next morning to enjoy the weekend with their families, and be back to work on Monday morning. Charlevoix had arrived in the modern era, and industry began to follow. The Ferry Seed Company was built to take advantage of the region's agricultural abundance. 1892 was also the year a substantial and reliable supply of well water came to Charlevoix and was piped through town from a little building on the southwest shore of Round Lake. Electricity would follow 3 years later. In 1893, the Catholic Church on the south side of town was completed. The Belvedere Club, realizing how many more people were going to be coming to Charlevoix, began to expand its hotel until 1902 when it reached its maximum size. The Episcopal Church was built from 1894 to 1895. To take pressure off the school from an increasing population, in 1895, 2 first through 4th grade schoolhouses were built, the Lincoln School on the south side and its twin, the Washington School seen here on the north side. They were in use until 1928. In 1896, a great event took place, the first arrival of the 3-year-old Manitou, the greyhound of the Great Lakes, which would make Charlevoix a favored stop hundreds of times during the next 3 decades. At 274 feet long, she was the last word in luxury, a floating palace of mahogany, velvet, brass, marble, and glass. For several years, the Manitou called in Charlevoix 3 times a week, on the way up Lake Michigan from Chicago, and 3 times on the way back. 1896 also saw the beginning of Charlevoix's first golf course, built by the Chicago Club just outside its grounds. This is what Bridge Street looked like that year. looking north from Mason Street with a few new amenities such as street lanterns and wooden sidewalks. 1897 saw the construction of Mr. Chapel's drugstore to replace a burned-out Noble Hotel on the Clinton Street corner. Tragedy struck that October. The Inn Hotel, being built by the railroad company on the terrace above the depot, was roughed in and partially completed. The company ordered more building and plastering on the top floors, but the lower floors had not been stabilized. A 60-mile-per-hour wind roared out of the north and collapsed the top-heavy building, killing 2 men and 2 horses. The wreckage was torn out and replaced within 2 months. The winter of 1898 saw Mother Nature bring in untold thousands of tons of ice along the Lake Michigan shore during an extensive windstorm. In June, the Majestic Inn opened, second in size in Michigan only to the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island, with 250 rooms capable of sleeping 800 people a night. Charlevoix had never seen anything like it. Dixon Avenue had to slice through the first fairway of the golf course to reach the inn's front door, so the Chicago Club reoriented the course northward and expanded it to 18 holes. Passengers stepped off the train and ascended an operatic staircase, then crossed a broad terrace and passed a stone fountain to reach the east entry stairs, at the top of which was the lobby. The dining room in the distance could accommodate 500 guests at one sitting. The inn even had its own indoor heated swimming pool down by the train depot, complete with slide, trapeze, raft, and potted palms. The hotel complex was the last word in elegant living. Robert Elston realized what was happening and built his own substantial hotel downtown at Bridge and Antrim Streets in 1898. The 1890s ended with 2 significant events: the merger of the railroad with the Pier Marquette Company in 1899, and the same year, the beginnings of Charlevoix's third Grand Hotel, the Beach, at the west end of Dixon Avenue, the only hotel ever to take advantage of the Lake Michigan panorama. It started out with only 15 rooms, but that would change in a hurry. 1899 was also the year that Roy Ranger started to build his Mackinac boats, and became one of the most renowned small boat builders on the Great Lakes. His Mackinac Shootle, which he built for a member of the Chicago Club at the beginning of the century, is still used as a workboat by the club today. A model of his Martha is in the Smithsonian Institution. The Federal Revenue Cutter Service built a supply depot warehouse and dock on the upper channel next to Pine Lake in 1899, later to become the buoy tending station.
you.